He thought it was just an old coin, something his grandfather tucked away in a dusty safe, maybe worth a few $100. So he walked into a pawn shop and asked for $2,000. But what happened next would stun everyone in the room. Because that small piece of gold, it wasn't just valuable. It belonged to a brutal chapter of Spanish history, and it carried secrets forged in blood and empire. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, a different coin, minted for a king who barely ruled 2 years, recently sold at auction for $240,000. Only a handful of them even exist. 2 coins, one forgotten in a drawer, the other celebrated by collectors across Europe. But how could 2 gold coins, both from Spain, end up with such wildly different fates? And what makes one worth 10 times the other? The answer reveals a shocking truth about hidden treasure, lost history, and the fine line between junk and jackpot. The man didn't think much of it. The coin had been passed down from his grandfather, tucked into a piece of plastic, left to sit for decades. It looked old, sure, a little exotic, but it didn't scream treasure. He carried it into a pawn shop with quiet hope. "I'd like to get $2,000 for it," he said casually. That's when Rick Harrison took a closer look and froze. The markings were unmistakable. A royal crest, a bold Latin motto, plus Ultra More Beyond, and just below it, an L. The letter that meant this coin came from Lima, Peru, deep within the Spanish colonial empire. What most people don't know is that Lima was home to some of the deadliest mines in human history in the 1700s. Spain forced enslaved workers and indigenous laborers into gold mines that plunged over 2,000 feet underground. Collapses were common. Air was scarce. Most who entered didn't come back. Yet from that hell came gold. Lots of it. Enough to fund Spain's wars, palaces, and global conquest. The coin in his hand, an 8 escudos, one of the largest gold coins the empire produced. But there was a problem. The coin was too perfect. Back then, minting was done by hand. Imperfect strikes were the norm. Gold was weighed, not measured by machine. Most surviving escudos are dented, worn, or uneven. This one looked like it had never been touched. Could it be a fake, a modern replica? Or was this really a royal coin, perfectly preserved for over 3 centuries? Just a few years ago, in a high-security auction house in Europe, a very different coin was placed on the block. It was a 100 pesetas gold coin, minted in Madrid in 1871. On its surface, the coin featured Amadeo I, a king most people have never heard of. His reign lasted barely 2 years, a political disaster marked by revolts, rejection, and eventual exile. Because of that chaos, his gold coinage was barely produced. Some issues were scrapped, others never left the mint. Today, only 6 to 8 examples of this particular 1871 coin are known to exist. The one at auction? Certified by PCGS as SP63, the highest grade ever recorded for that type. It wasn't just rare, it was flawless. Its surface carried a full golden frost across the portrait and arms. The edges were laser sharp. The legends popped against reflective fields with an almost cameo-like contrast. Collectors went wild. This was more than currency. This was royal. Propaganda struck at a time of national collapse, surviving revolution, fire, and time itself. It sold for $240,000, one of the most expensive Spanish coins ever auctioned. And yet, it had something in common with the coin found in a pawn shop. Both coins were born from moments of crisis, one minted under the weight of a collapsing monarchy, the other from the depths of colonial cruelty. But while one became a centerpiece of numismatic legend, the other almost disappeared in a dusty plastic sleeve, until someone finally looked closer. Rick Harrison had seen enough strange items to know when something didn't add up. The coin looked too clean, too perfect, and in a world full of counterfeit treasure, that's often the first red flag. So he called in a specialist, an expert on Spanish colonial coinage, someone who'd seen hundreds of 8 escudos pass through auctions, collections, and unfortunately, fakes. The expert arrived early that morning, held the coin in gloved hands, and immediately went silent. "This is a Lima minted 8 escudos," he finally said. "You can tell by the L right here. That means it was struck in Peru." And the PVS, he smiled. "It stands for Plus Ultra, Spain's declaration that there's always more to conquer." But slogans were one thing, weight was another. He placed the coin on a precision scale, 27.0 grams. That might sound like a technical detail, but to coin experts, it's the gold standard. Quite literally, colonial coins were meant to be minted to a precise weight. But over time, fakes, wear, and even gold shavings have robbed most survivors of their full mass. 27.0 grams on the dot. That almost never happens. The expert leaned in. The details were crisp. The depth of strike was right. There were no signs of casting bubbles, tool marks, or modern tampering. His verdict was short. It's real. And then came the shocker. If I had to price this at auction, I'd say around $18,000. The man who brought it in blinked. Just moments ago, he had asked for $2,000. Now, the coin in his pocket was worth almost 10 times that. Both coins, the pawn shop 8 escudos and the Amadeo I 100 pesetas, are made of gold. Both are Spanish. Both are rare. But the reason one was worth $11,000 and the other $240,000 comes down to 3 key things: preservation, certification, and narrative. The 8 escudos was incredibly well preserved for a coin struck in the 1700s, a time when hand-hammered strikes left most coins looking warped and uneven. But it had never been graded. It had no certificate, no digital paper trail. It was raw gold with a story that was mostly guesswork. Meanwhile, the Amadeo I coin came with the full weight of history behind it, graded by PCGS as SP63, a designation reserved for coins that were likely made as specimens or presentation pieces. And when that kind of coin hits the auction block, collectors don't see metal, they see legend. That's why it soared to $240,000. So what's the real difference in value? The Amadeo coin came with certified rarity, elite condition, and an iconic backstory. The 8 escudos had history, yes, but until someone looked closer, it was just another family heirloom. Which raises a fascinating question. How many forgotten fortunes are sitting in safes, drawers, and attics, simply waiting for the right person to recognize them? When most people think of gold, they think of weight, melt value, maybe a little historical flair. But in the world of rare coins, value isn't just about the metal, it's about the myth. Let's start with the 8 escudos. It was never officially appraised, never entered into a major catalog. Had it been submitted for certification, say, graded and slabbed by NGC or PCGS, its value could have soared even higher. Some 8 escudos coins from the 1700s, in similar or worse condition, have sold for $15,000 to $25,000 at high-profile auctions. But it lacked pedigree, no paperwork, no auction history. And in the world of collectibles, provenance is power. Compare that to the Amadeo I 100 pesetas, which carried the full royal treatment, certified SP63 by PCGSA specimen designation reserved for coins with elite strike and finish, featured in catalogs, magazines, and exhibitions, backed by a dramatic origin story, a dethroned king, a collapsed monarchy, and coins struck in secrecy during political chaos. When it hit the auction block, it didn't just sell, it ignited a bidding war. Final hammer price, $240,000. That's the difference between something that looks valuable and something the world knows is valuable. And the twist, the 8 escudos had the same potential. It just hadn't been introduced to the right stage yet. Back in the pawn shop, negotiations began. Rick made an offer, $10,000. The man hesitated. He'd just learned his grandfather's old coin was worth far more than he ever imagined. He pushed back, how about 12? Rick Harrison shook his head. 10's already generous, he said, but I'll go up to 11. And just like that, they shook hands. The man who walked in asking for $2,000 left with $11,000 cash in hand. What he didn't know was that similar coins had sold for much more, and with certification, auction placement, and a little luck, his could have been next. But still, it was a life-changing moment. He thought he had a family keepsake. He walked out with a small fortune, and perhaps most importantly, he discovered that history doesn't always hide in museums. Sometimes it waits in silence, right under our noses. The Amadeo coin had every advantage: royal origin, extreme rarity, flawless preservation, and international certification. It was designed for collectors before anyone even knew it. The 8 escudos, it survived revolutions, empires, and centuries of silence, buried in a safe, nearly forgotten by time. And yet, both coins told a story of power, loss, and survival. One reached the world stage, the other was almost lost forever. So here's the real question. What's hiding in your attic? What stories are buried in the drawers of forgotten furniture? Could there be a $250,000 treasure sitting in plain sight, just waiting to be found? Because in the world of gold and history, every scratch, every stamp, every letter means something. And sometimes, the most ordinary-looking object can carry the most extraordinary truth.